Hi guys, welcome to my channel once again. This is Bar Talk with Ola and my name is Mujola Oluwa. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, leave me comments in the comment section, and by all means share the video with your friends and foes alike. And if you're a returning viewer or a subscriber, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. Today I want to talk about something that's very important, especially for lawyers. I want to talk about opportunities available to lawyers, and I'm going to be using the mnemonic or acronym Mr. Niger D. If you went to school in Nigeria, we were taught Mr. Niger D as an acronym or mnemonic, for remembering the features of a human being. So MR NIGER D, for all the processes and the things, the features that a human being exhibits that makes you know that, oh, this is a human being. M stands for movement, R for respiration, N for nutrition, I for irritability, G for growth, E for excretion, R for reproduction, and D for death. That's the final, the final step, the final stage in a human being's life. So I want to use Mr. Niger D to talk about the various opportunities that are available to lawyers across different sectors and different fields in life. So M, movement. As long as people are moving, monies are being spent. And as long as monies are being spent, there's an opportunity for everyone. But particularly for lawyers, you could, go into transport advisory. These days, fintechs are developing apps for, ride hailing, You could hail a cab, you could hail a bike, and all. You could become their lawyer, taking care of all the legals for them as they develop such applications for transportation. And of course, you could go into tax advisory, whatever is taxable, there's an opportunity for a lawyer there. So you could go into their tax advisory, for transportation lines, big transportation lines, not only by road, aviation, rail transport and all of that. You could go into tax advisory or tax litigation for them. For all the sectors and all the fields I'm going to be talking about today, litigation applies. And if you're a litigation lawyer, you're safe, you're home and dry, because there will always be an opportunity for you in any field that's litigable. That is, in any field, on any matter that can be litigated upon. A lawyer will always have opportunities, but essentially for movement, transportation, you could develop a transportation practice. I know that there are law firms that have a transportation practice, and under that they could have, rail transport, road transport, shipping, maritime, aviation. So there's always an opportunity for a lawyer in this field. I know that there was this time at work when I was asked to advise on a haulage tax issue. So what happened was that a company had been taxed haulage tax, and then they had retained the services of a lawyer to contest the tax, and I was asked to advise if the tax was applicable to them. They were moving goods, even though their object of trade was production of that particular good, but they needed to move it from their own factory to the final consumers. So my advisory was basically on if haulage tax applied to them or not. So assuming you are a lawyer, you would have an opportunity on a tax advisory, even for transportation businesses. So transportation, that's what we'll talk about in movement. You could build or develop a transport practice that would cut across, interfacing with regulatory bodies, as regards transportation in your country, in Nigeria, for instance. For example, there was a time that ride-hailing services, certain ride-hailing services were banned. If you were their lawyer, the opportunity there for you is to interface with the government, interface with the regulatory body. That's some good work you'll be doing there and earning your money. And of course, you would be able to draw up their contracts for them, between them and their riders, their drivers, and of course between them and their final consumers. You would be able to help them work on the legals for their app, since everybody is going electronic these days. There are so many opportunities available, and of course the taxation aspect. So there's an opportunity for lawyers in transportation, and that's movement, as we go by Mr. Niger D. You could also build an immigration law practice, under movement. That's not only transportation. You could build an immigration law practice, talk about, naturalization, helping people with naturalization, helping organizations with corporate immigration, helping individuals with personal immigrations, regulatory compliance for companies, movement, not just movement of people, but movement of goods, movement of services. There are so many opportunities there. So you could be an immigration lawyer helping, foreigners with their documentation. You could build a practice in expatriate mobility advisory. So many opportunities available. So long as people are moving, so long as goods are moving, services are being moved from state to state, from country to country, there's an opportunity for a lawyer to provide his legal services and earn money while at it. So, you could look up some of these things and, decide if you want to build a practice in that area. The second one is Respiration by Mr. Niger D. Respiration, breathe. We exhale and we inhale. So, there are opportunities for a lawyer in the respiration sphere. And what opportunities? We could talk about global warming. We could talk about becoming an environmental lawyer. You could make it your own preoccupation, to advocate for clean air, clean water, clean environment, just to ensure that people continue to breathe, people continue to respire. So, that's an area of opportunity for you as a lawyer and a human being. You could preoccupy yourself with the 7th and 11th Sustainable Development Goals. They are just in line. Essentially, you could become an environmental lawyer, helping to structure contracts and negotiate investments in the clean environment sphere. People are looking for ways of generating cleaner energy. Having cleaner water, cleaner air, cleaner energy generally. And there are lawyers that are preoccupied with ensuring this. I worked on a document once, and it was for a colleague that was preoccupied with incentivizing investment in clean energy. So his preoccupation was to help clients, investors, structure favorable deals, when investing. So you could become an environmental law expert. You could build a practice in environmental law. There's an opportunity there for you as a lawyer. So you could work for organizations, international organizations and local organizations as their legal advisor, even as they are preoccupied, with developing cleaner energy, having a clean environment. You could also work with the United Nations, you could work with the African Union, you could work with, all those international organizations as an international lawyer, as a lobbyist, as a legal advisor, as a policy maker in the environmental law scene. So there are opportunities abounding for lawyers in that field. So that's Respiration, Mr. Niger D. The next thing is nutrition. Nutrition. As long as people eat, there are opportunities for lawyers in the nutrition scene. So of course, there are restaurants that are being started, eateries, patisseries, bakeries. They could retain your services as a lawyer should they run into any problem. You could help them with, franchising, establishing their branches and their brand in other countries. You could help them with their workers' immigration documentation, naturalization. You could be an immigration lawyer helping them sort, the movement of their staff from one country to another, or their recruitment of local staff. You could also be a labor and employment lawyer helping them with their labor and employment disputes and whatsoever issue. You could also cater to their regulatory compliance needs, immigration needs, labor and employment needs, taxation needs, like the example that I gave the other time. I advised that company on their olic tax, if it was applicable to them. Of course, it was a fellow lawyer that had written that, the company was not covered by olic tax. So that's an opportunity for the lawyer on the other side, retained by the bread factory. Yeah, it was a bread factory. And then an opportunity for me on the other side as the taxing body. So there are opportunities abounding for lawyers in the field of nutrition. You could cater, to the legal needs of food services providers, caterers, restaurants, eateries, hotels, and what have you. So they could retain your services even for litigation purposes. For instance, the Donoghue and Stevenson case that I discussed earlier on this channel, of course, it was a lawyer that represented Stevenson. So these are some of the opportunities available as far as nutrition is concerned. You could, do more research, these companies that are selling food, basically, or producing food, producing things that are being used nutrition-wise. These companies need the services of lawyers for their litigation purposes, for advisory purposes, for regulatory compliance, for their labor and employment needs, for immigration purposes, franchising, and all of that. So you could look at it if you're a lawyer, and you could build a practice along this line. So that's nutrition. So if you're a lawyer, there are opportunities for you in nutrition. There are food sale businesses, there are small and medium scale enterprises who are focused on food production, food distribution, so you could cater to their needs. There are restaurants, there are breweries, and a host of food producing and food distribution companies and businesses that you could cater to. They could retain your services as their brand lawyer, as their company lawyer, as their business's lawyer, or they could come to you on a one-off basis. But there are opportunities for you as a lawyer in this line. So look at it. There are agri-businesses that are springing up every day, agri-tech and all of that. You could work with them as regards regulatory compliance. You could work with them as regards scaling, as regards international best practices. You could work with them as regards sustainable development goals that are aimed at eradicating hunger and all of that. So there are different opportunities. Please look them up and do more research. But as far as nutrition is concerned, there's a whole wide world of opportunities for lawyers in that field. So please look at it. The next one is irritability. That's response to stimuli. Irritability. So you know that there are skincare product lines, and they are being manufactured by companies and all of that. They could have you on their retainership, and you could be their company lawyer, advising them on what is legal and what is not regarding their products. And of course, you could work in medical law. You could work in medical law. There are people who probably like to sue for medical negligence or for skincare products use gone wrong. You could also develop a practice in that line. You could work as the legal advisor or legal officer with companies that are in the skincare product line. So of course you could, whether they are producing it or they are distributing it, there's always an opportunity for lawyers to give them legal solutions. So please look it up. If you're a lawyer and you intend to build a practice in that area, I'm certain there are opportunities for you. So skincare product lines, that's what I could think about when I looked at irritability, basically response to stimuli. And of course, you could also work in medical. You could also build a practice in medical law. It's in that line. So it's a veritable opportunity for lawyers. And of course, any litigation arising from that area, a lawyer would always be needed. So there are opportunities for lawyers too, as far as irritability is concerned. That's all about irritability. The next one is growth. There are myriads of opportunities for lawyers as regards growth. When we talk about growth, we're going to be talking about reproductive rights. Of recent, reproductive rights have become a very topical issue. And, I'm so certain that, if you're a lawyer that has built a practice in that area, you will become an authority. And, of course, you can cater to the legal needs in that area. Of course, we'll talk about child rights too. We'll talk about, sexual reproductive rights. We'll talk about family law, we'll talk about women rights, and then we'll talk about IP, when people are growing, they're changing clothes, they're changing shoes, they're changing the equipment they are using, they're changing the things they eat. So we would have intellectual property law in that field too. People are developing designs, they are developing patterns, they are creating new designs in the fashion line. We would also talk about food production companies, that are developing and producing and distributing food for babies, for adolescents, for adults, and what have you. We'll talk about FMCGs, fast-moving consumer goods producers and distributors. They also need lawyers to cater to their legal needs. We'll talk about regulatory compliance for these companies. We'll talk about asset management. We'll talk about finance. We'll talk about competition, antitrust. So many areas available to lawyers in this field. So please look it up, and if you'd like to build a practice in that area, it's a very, very bankable area for a lawyer to build a practice in. Growth. What are the things that are involved in our growth? Every day we eat, so that you could be a lawyer for a food producing company or for food distribution companies. For retail stores, wholesale stores. You could be their lawyer in case of litigation or in case of dissatisfied customers and all of that. We'll talk about ADR, and we'll talk about litigation. So many things involved, but essentially there are always opportunities for lawyers in the field of growth. So you look at we wear clothes every day, we change clothes, we wear shoes, bags, and all of that. So in the fashion line, lawyers are needed to cater to the legal needs, to provide legal solutions, for these people that are producing and distributing in the fashion lines. We would also need lawyers, to help protect the intellectual property of, inventors and creatives in the growth area. People who are designing clothes, shoes, bags, people who are designing food components, food supplements, all those things. So lawyers are always needed in that area. So when you think of growth, just look at what are the things that are involved in growth for human beings, and how does a lawyer come into play. You would always find an opportunity. So look at it if you're a lawyer and if you'd like to build a practice along those lines, and I'm sure that you will definitely find something that will provide solutions for mankind and that will put food on your own table. That's it for growth. The next thing is excretion. Human beings excrete. We excrete, and we're not only talking about passing feces. We would also talk about how we dispose waste. We'll talk about waste disposal. We'll talk about maintaining a clean environment, recycling, and all of that. So if you're a lawyer, the easiest way is to build a practice in environmental law, to preoccupy yourself with how we can ensure that as we excrete and as we use things and dispose waste, we are able to preserve our environment. You'll be talking about SDGs 7 and 11. You would be preoccupied with ozone layer depletion, clean air, clean water. It's a very veritable area of law to build a practice in. There are people who are lobbyists. For instance, there are people who are lobbying for reduction of fossil fuel production. You could be a lawyer in that area. You could become an international lawyer working with international organizations, trying to see how we could regulate and probably control, clean and safe waste disposal and recycling in our societies. So it's something that's the business of lawyers. So it's something that would create a solution for the world and put food on your table. So when you think of excretion, think about the environment and think about how, as a lawyer, you could, protect the environment and put food on your own table. You could become a policy advisor, a policy maker. You could become, a lobbyist. You could become, a litigation lawyer, even for disputes that arise as regards waste disposal. So excretion, that's excretion. Another thing is reproduction. Reproduction, that's one of the key areas, one of the key features of the human being. The human being reproduces its kind. So for a lawyer, there are opportunities in medical law, in child rights law, in family law. You could preoccupy yourself with advocating against sexual and gender-based violence. We talk about assault of minors every day. We talk about rape. We talk about sexual molestation. We talk about violence, gender-based violence, sexual-based violence. Those are things that a lawyer could preoccupy himself or herself with. And then we talk about estate planning and succession, how a father or a mother, passes their own estate, their own legacy to their own children. So you could look at representing families representing individuals in planning their estates and managing their estate. You could look at writing the will of families, of a father or a mother that wants to pass his or her properties to his or her children. So those are opportunities for lawyers. You could concern yourself with family law, representing petitioners and respondents in divorce proceedings. And then we could talk about medical law. You could build a practice in medical law, looking at reproductive rights and all of that. For all of these things, litigation is one certain area where a lawyer can build a practice. And of course there's ADR too. You could train yourself to become an arbitrator, or a mediator, or a conciliator, or what have you, in across these fields. And of course, we'll talk about advisory. You could be the family lawyer, the one the family retains and calls in case of any legal trouble whatsoever. So that's another opportunity for lawyers. And the last but not the least is death. Death. When you think of death, what opportunities do you think abound for lawyers in that area? I'd say that estate planning and succession, like I've said earlier, and of course wills, probates, estate administration. A lawyer is always needed to plan these things ahead of time and to manage them in case of unforeseen exigencies. So it's important. You could become a family lawyer. You could build a practice in estate planning and succession, where different people come to you as opposed to being a family's lawyer. Different people come to you, for their estate planning and succession needs, to write their wills, to help them get letters of administration, to administer their estate. It's a very robust area of law, and of course litigations that might arise from these aspects also. A lawyer would always be needed to represent people in court. So these are the opportunities that are available to lawyers across these different fields. When you think of Mr. Niger D, think of these features of the human being, and then think of how a lawyer can create solutions across these features and still put food on their table. That's essentially what this video is about, and I hope that I've been able to touch one area or two areas that might pique your interest and you would want to look at, or that might encourage you if you're already building a practice in that area. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you always in my very next video. Toodles! Nutrition, irritability, antitrust and competition, asset management, regulatory compliance, commercial contracts, franchising, insurance, employment advisory, intellectual property. We talk about trademarks, patents, advertising and marketing, tax advisory, transportation advisory, and of course litigation for all aspects. These are some of the areas of law that cut across all the features of the human being. I hope you look them up and you build a veritable, formidable practice for yourself that creates legal solutions for the world, and of course puts food on your own table. It's Mr. Niger D.
Mm-hmm.